What is going on, guys? This is Joe Young coming at you with another how-to video. Today we're doing part 3 of how to keep a planet reef tank. Alright, so in part 3 we're going to be covering fertilizers. So with plants, what they need is some sort of light source, which was covered in part 2, and a food source, or we're going to be calling it fertilizers in this case. So the food source can come from a different couple of things as stock waste, so like your fish pooping, your corals pooping, anything like that. It can be converted so that your plant can use for food. And the other portion is supplementing it with fertilizers, and that can help the plants grow as well. So the first tip I have today is using fertilizers for your planet reef tank. So similar to freshwater planet tanks, saltwater planet tanks, this is like one of the secrets into keeping a planet reef tank is dosing. So have some sort of schedule. I use a macro micro schedule to dose my reef tank, so I only dose twice a week, so on a Sunday and a Monday with a macro and then a micro on the next day. So this is the kind of a low-tech, semi-low-tech schedule that I've done or used. Depending on how heavy your tank is, you may need to dose it a little bit more, and so that really depends on how your, reef tank and how your plants are reacting. If you're seeing dead leaves or certain leaves dying, and you may need to dose a little bit more. So really you just have to pay attention to how your plants react. Alright, so what kind of fertilizer do you use? I use a dry method fertilizers where you kind of just grab them and you throw them into a bottle and you mix it yourself. It's way cheaper, and you can, get a lot more for the same amount of money. So it comes in kind of like these powdered rock form. So I bought this from Greenleaf Aquariums. You can get different ones. So this is the PPS Pro versions, and this is just one bag, but there's multiple bags. You basically measure it out, and what you can do is you can grab one of these empty bottles here, you can throw it in there and you just mix it, and then you shake it up, and you can use this to dose. There's measurements. Depending on how big your tank is, you can dose accordingly. So that's what I use. I use the PPS Pro style dosing, and I kind of change up my schedule. I don't really follow like the once every day. You can do whatever you like. Another good product to use are over-the-counter ones that are already made for you guys. So like, for example, like Seachem. Seachem makes a really good line of fertilizers for plants, like freshwater plants I'm talking about, and you can get those. The only drawback is if you have multiple planet tanks or bigger tanks, that can get really expensive, because for the same price, if you use the dry method, it can last you like years and years, and with like the over-the-counter where they already built it for you or they already mixed it for you, can cost like, I don't know, three, 4 times more in terms of pricing. Alright, so tip number 2. This is a little backwards, guys. And this is due to what you're actually doing, a planet reef tank, right? Tip number 2 is don't siphon your substrate. So this is similar with your planet tanks on freshwater. You try to avoid siphoning your substrate so that you can keep pretty much the fertilizers, the waste, what's being broken down in the substrate, so that your plants with roots will convert those into food and grab those as energy. Now this only applies to plants that actually have roots. For example, my blade grass here, they have roots and they grab all the way down into the sand, and that's where they can convert waste and use that as a food source. If you are not planning to do this, then this doesn't really apply to you. So if you have stuff that kind of just like floats on top, okay, sure, you can definitely siphon the floor of your tank. I do siphon it once in a while. Once I do see some sort of detritus build up in a certain corner where there's no plants, for example, like the far left corner or the far right corner where there's no plants, if there's any like cyanobacteria, basically anything that you see that you don't like, you can start siphoning. I'm not trying to say don't siphon it at all. I'm just trying to say avoid it, because that's a great source of food for your plants. And the third tip, now this is also backwards from what they're probably saying out there in terms of keeping reef, is use minimal live rocks. Now, they have a rule where, keep a minimum of like 1 pound per gallon. A lot of people do more, a lot of people do less. But in reef tank, your live rock is your filter. This is what basically breaks down the bad stuff from ammonia, other nitrites, down to nitrates. So if you think about it, if you have a bunch of live rocks in your tank and it's doing, its job where it's converting all this nitrite and killing it and removing it from your tank, it's taking away from your plants. So in this tank, for example, I have very low live rocks. It's really just there for scaping and for looks. It's not really there for filtration. My filtration is actually coming from my plants consuming that. So how do you like those 2 tips so far? Those 2 tips are really against like every reefing book, or even like keeping like normal like tanks, right? They tell you to do a certain thing, you want to minimize this. And actually in a Planet tank, you want to actually promote a little bit more ways, a little bit more things, so that the plants can actually take care of that by, converting that into their food source. All right, so a couple other tips is, if you have a light stock tank, like for example, you don't have that much corals, you don't have that much fish, you don't have that much invertebrates in your tank. And for example, mine is a semi-light stock tank because I only have a few corals in here. I have like 1, 2, 3, 4 fish in here, and 1 shrimp. So, it's a 33 gallon and actually 2 more down here. So it's semi-light for this tank actually. And also because of the corals, people like to put a lot of corals. So this tip here is, you want to power feed your fish, or you want to power feed the tank a little bit. This generates basically waste from the fish, from the corals, and again, this gets converted into food source for your plants. And you can do the opposite. Instead of power feeding, the fish, and you want to keep, more livestock, throw more livestock in there. Maybe like overstock just a little bit, so that you have food source for your plants. All right, guys, and that's it. If you guys haven't checked out the previous videos, part 1 and 2, go ahead and check those in the playlist. And until next time, guys, peace.